Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks, and of course, uh, and co-hosts. Thank you very much for being part of the show. Today is third pillar of exploration Thursday, in which we talk about the third pillar of tabletop role-playing games. Now, the first and second pillars kind of correspond to combat and social interactions, but it holds a special place for me for just to talk about exploration in and of itself. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And we are going to frame our discussion today and talk about the destruction, the defeat of the big bad evil guy. Yes, of course, at the end of a campaign, or maybe as the beginning of our storyline, whatever big bad is out there, they've kicked the bucket. We opened up a can of whoop ass. We've taken them down. Everyone's got their fists raised in the air. There's music swelling. There's all kinds of celebration. And then we're going to talk about the after effects of that. And I thought we would, to even further focus our attention down, I thought we would talk about some of the top 3 to 5 big bads that are pretty tropish in our fantasy, and then come up with a number of different types of explorative elements related to that. Now, I think for me, exploration is so wide that you kind of have to narrow even that down, or maybe we can come up with categories. So one form of exploration is literally the knowledge version of exploration. It is the exploring the countryside, interacting with new peoples, getting lost, being found, and essentially picking up bits and baubles along the way to get from A to B. And that might involve crossing treacherous rope bridges, scaling mountainsides, walking along dangerous cliff sides, of course, without handles or railings or anything like that, and diving down into deep caverns filled with water, and those kind of things. And I feel that part of gaming is kind of lost on us, atrophied even, maybe not even utilized at all. And then I think a second part of exploration is the combat overlay. It is not just punching people in the throat, but where are you where are you located when you're punching people in the throat? You know, it's I always bring up the analogy of the alligator is scary, but it's more scary if you're standing in waist deep dank waters in a swamp, where if you are grabbed by the ankle and dragged underwater, that is the part that the location itself becomes very dangerous. And then lastly, I think it's the larger aspect of world building, uh, 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 an accursed desert, of course, go back to the dank swamp, a aquatic village or something that lives inside of a caldera. We was just looking at the Discord, whether there is floating cities and airships, or living in the Underdark and navigating around Menzoberranzan or something of that nature. So, yeah. Oh, no problem there, Z. Zamar is like, just saying good morning. I will catch the stream on the back end. Feel like I haven't slept in a week. Yeah. Your health and or safety is more important than this show ever will be. But always glad to have you. The so I'll let's start out with let's start out with a common thing: fiends. Usually fiends, dead cultist, open portal to the netherworld, maybe a evil spawn sent back to the world from which it has come. And so pit fiends, balors, succubi, demogorgon, even orcus, sent back to the worlds, the nether regions of which they've come. And I think one of the things that happens when evil beings come from these terrible worlds is that, of course, we have to have a place where, demons spawn from. And while not necessarily an environmental hazard, the ever spawning portal, be it a glowing disc in the air and demons are spilling from it, whether there's a dark crimson clouds in the sky and things are spilling from the air, or it is far more grounded, maybe something along the lines of the Alien movies with pus filled bumps spewing out of the ground and getting close to them, or even making a sound or something causes them to split open and disgorge creatures that are covered in various kinds of mucus and goo or something like that. While that's not necessarily environmental, it can have it ramps the tension up, and that's one of the things I've been promoting, that the environment allows us, it gives us a dial to ramp up tension. And if there's constantly demons pouring out after the PCs, sure, maybe they can beat ass on, one or two or even a dozen of them. But if it's constantly spawning, maybe the goal is not to fight the demons or devils or whatever, daemons and slotty and all other kinds of fantasy creatures. Maybe the goal is to get from A to B, or to accomplish a goal of closing or opening something, retrieving the MacGuffin, which could be a magic item, a key, a scroll, or saving innocent individuals. Getting from A to B goals are very common in action movies and stories, and A to B might just be getting across, as simple as getting across a room, navigating across what would essentially be a minefield, or achieving a goal in a way that is not normally done in, say, Dungeons and Dragons, meaning like maybe something has to be done, but it's got to be very quiet and done slowly, using like acrobatics and sleight of hand to very, or even stealth, to move across a chamber, in ensuring that we don't disturb the pus filled things filled with mucus and goo that are going to disgorge yet another couple of dozen demons at us, where we're just going to burn all of our resources before getting to another great evil. Also, we have the classic, well, the sun's blotted out. Maybe that has a thing where we really don't see much daylight. There's too much smoke and haze and ash in the air. Also, gouts of flame randomly erupting from the ground, poisonous clouds rolling over the landscape, um, clouds of swarms of locusts destroying every living plant around, pools of poisonous water. All of those things, I think, really fit into the explorative portion of gaming. And mind you, we can use our creatures, spell effects, and traps and reskin them to make this basically hellscape on Earth. Meaning, like, those pools of water could be oozes of any types. Something that is gelatinous doesn't need to be shaped in the shape of a cube. It could be acid rain coming down from the air, or maybe you use some spell effects like, oh, I don't know, acid arrow or something of that nature, but literally it's spilling down from the air and the PCs need to run for cover. Or those random gouts of flame can really change a battlefield if the PCs are doing battle, and lo and behold, they don't know if they're standing over a crag or crevice or some kind of sphincter that's going to erupt flame out of the ground. And of course, you can come up with any kind of randomizer for the cinematic environs books that we write over here at Critical Hit Publishing that are on drive-through. We use something called even the odds, and so you always want to even the odds. So you take a die, you roll the number. If it's even, you're safe. If you're odd, if it's an odd die number, and you could take any die number. So you always want to even the odds. When everything's even, Steven, you're pretty cool. And that might be anything from a volcanic rock about to crash down on your head, to flame erupting from the ground, or you're crossing that rope bridge and one of the wood panels may break through from underneath your feet, or any kind of randomized lightning coming out of the sky, whatever kind of randomizer. And that randomizer might have, skill checks, saving throws to avoid, something like that. So, also, lastly, I will say that after having just watched the movie The Tomorrow War, and we've seen this. The Tomorrow War is like an homage to nearly every alien. Uh, Destructive alien movie or intellectual property ever made. It's a hodgepodge. I call it an homage. I actually had fun with that movie. A lot of people are blasting it recently, but one of the things that happens in the movie is, it's not really much of a spoiler, is that there are aliens, and the aliens stop and scream out to, like a lion roaring. It screams out to other creatures, and they come a running. To be honest with you, plot holes aside, because they abound aplenty in the movie. I agree with Vampanoid. It was a fun movie. The creature design, the design, the movement, the audio, it was pretty good. Yeah, I gotta admit, they did a really good job on it. More than a good job. It was pretty fun. Uh, but when PCs attack owlbears, how often do the owlbears stop to roar out for, I don't know, reinforcements or something? The the tension built from PCs doing battle, and one or more of the creatures, even if they're humanoid, standing in the background, screaming out to, or blowing a horn, or shooting a flare in the sky, or waving a banner to call in reinforcements, is a great way for us as the dungeon master to go, you know what? I thought this was going to be a tough fight. I'm going to probably have to add a couple more couple of more baddies into this fight to make it a little bit more interesting. And what's a better way than having reinforcements come in? And those reinforcements, the PCs may be able to use the environment to stop the reinforcements. Like, I don't know, cross that rope bridge again and cut it down or burn it down, or get over a crag, or hide in a crevice, or run across rooftops, or cause an avalanche to cut the reinforcements coming in, or something like that, using the environment to their benefit. Let's see if I can get through this comment here. King Hung Badass says, in a 2000 plus times massive universe, cartoon skeleton clocked up a big volcanoes of the little ones around it would feel just got up with smog so he can use the dark beast to conquer Eternia. I think somebody has He-Man on the brain, but I'm going to decipher a little bit of this. I would say that when it comes to like exploration and such, like we love ourselves some volcanoes and everything related to volcanoes. Again, micro earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, poisonous gases, steam, and gouts of flame shooting up out the ground. Love that kind of stuff from our fiendish creatures. And even if Orcus, Demogorgon, Maglubiet, or whoever, any of these demonic creatures, Tiamat or whatever, has been cast off and defeated, maybe the landscape's been altered, and the PCs are still living through this place where the ground is desecrated and whatnot. Also, let's not forget that we have every right to have lingering spell effects in our landscape because of the entrance of a lot of our monsters, right? We see this with the lair effects of, say, a red dragon. So let's go into dragons here. So if you take a look at descriptions of dragons, oftentimes when they exist for miles around, they have an effect on the landscape. Why can't we do this with all of our big bads and their effect on the landscape? And maybe people are living in this dark mutated world. Again, red dragons living in volcanic regions, blue dragons, being in storms and whatnot. So of course we do have ourselves like weather effects and things of that nature that we can use. And when I say we can have lingering spell effects, literally open up spell book and look for some spell effects and put them down on your battlefield, whether it is a bane or a bless that's in an area, someplace that's consecrated or desecrated that the PCs must navigate through, permanent fog. What are some other things out there? Heck, when the players sleep, their dreams could be invaded by like a dream or a phantasmal killer spell or something of that nature. And again, it's a tension timer that we can use. If the PCs try to sleep in the accursed swamp, and each night they get ready to sleep, they're being attacked in their dreams by some kind of phantasmal killer or a dreamscape effect or a sleep spell or anything like that that's going to cause them to oversleep, to have, I don't know, the plants grow through their body and be attacked by assassin vines or something like that, then the player characters might not want to take that rest in that region because it's too dangerous if they stay still or something. So anything that prevents analysis paralysis, anything that keeps the players moving, guessing, trudging forward, navigating the region, having a hard decision, but having a decision they have to make immediately, always helps. So another thing with dragons, let's stick on the dragon part, is the destruction of a dragon and killing a big giant ancient dragon that falls to the landscape. What happens next? Yesterday, we and oftentimes on the channel we talk about flocks of carrion birds circling overhead, decomposition as the blood and gristle sink into the ground and mutate the plants and or water table that are in the region. Maybe there's something acidic in the stomach, and a big giant kaiju-sized monster might be carrying around a bunch of other monsters inside of it, just as a side effect of its huge, enormous size, like a dragon turtle with small, I don't know, ticks or frogs on the back of it, or a dragon with carrying oozes inside of its stomach because it can eat things and decompose them very greatly and whatnot. Also, the skin, the blood, the gristle, the skeletal part. We've seen plenty of artwork and concept art of people living inside the rib cage of a massive beast, and this might happen after the death of a dragon. Also, dragons are magical. What if magic changes in the region? Maybe it has an extreme cost to casting magics in the area, whether it is automatic wild surges from chaos, or magic is very difficult to cast. It costs you an additional spell slot to cast any spell, or you must make arcana checks or something of that nature every time you cast a spell. Now we can move on to say, oh, and of course we have throwing in a little bit of a combat and social interaction. Maybe there are common people who are uh you're so silly, King Hunk. Maybe there are people um, who want to take advantage of the dead body of the big giant kaiju, and use the scales to make armor and sell the teeth off, and use the fluid from its dead eye to um, make alchemical formulas or something like that. And the PCs might have to run around to stop all of that. Of course, the PCs are probably going to want to get that stuff for themselves. And why wouldn't you? Why not? So yeah, anything that decomposes, from the smell to the heat released from it, to swarms of carrion bugs and insects and birds or bird-like things circling overhead, waiting to to have themselves a meal, and then all the predators that like to eat the carrion creatures themselves as well. So it moves on. So and all of that could have not just monster and creature effects, but the the dead internal acids of the exposed organs of the dragon might start carving a crevice in the ground, and it's very difficult to walk along, or maybe it's very muddy or sticky, and now the PCs are walking through a red swamp of nothing but blood and softened granite over the years that the dragon's body's been sitting out there. Now, um, Vampanoid says, had a terrible thought for the big bad evil guy calling for reinforcements. High level wizard could cast wish. Everything you've ever killed is now back and right behind you. Make those murder hobos cry. Yeah, that's a great wish. Use of a great wish. Yeah, like, I wish every enemy you've ever defeated is appeared right now. And then all the murder hobo PCs look backwards and they're like, what? All those taverns they burned down and the innocent people they murdered, now they've got like magic items in their hand from the enemies that they've killed. Demogorgon handing out a couple of choice items to some innocent people. Like, yeah, we're all gonna work together. It's reverse Avengers. Opposite Avengers. Hey, Vampanoid, thanks. Yep, absolutely. The bad guys are like, we get our revenge now. Hung King's talking about Justin Bieber. Hung King says a lich using the hero's dead ancestors to hunt them down. That's a great storyline too, especially if the PCs are like, and what a way to, that's actually a great way to make something personal too. Yeah, it's not just some random undead. It's like your aunts and uncles and relatives and stuff. Like, not only are we returned from the dead, we're kind of pissed off at you. That innkeeper becomes a wraith or a white or a banshee or something, like, you never paid me, you owe me a tip. The banshees scream. The PCs are like, shut up, I paid you. No, you didn't. It was an illusion over a copper coin. You made it seem like gold when you were second level. Anyway, all right, so let's move on to talk about craziness. Let's move on to like elder gods. So we've killed. Yeah, Mike says making undead familiar is genius. And not only do you don't necessarily need to go, hey guys, this undead person is your uncle. Roll initiative. Don't do that, or not immediately. Have that person harass them, follow them, um, stand across the crevice, waving to them and calling out their sins or something. Um, a life unfinished, and have that undead creature between initiative rolls and combat rolls. Throw some role playing in there, like, you left your sister behind. Why you were kicked out. You're a friggin' murder hobo. That's why you're homeless. And she will be back. Whatever the case might be. I mean, there's all kinds of things, and of course, describing the wounds they suffered at the hands of the PC, or the pain and suffering that happened because they failed to do something to save their family member that became an undead or whatever. Yeah, that would be awesome. I love personalizing your random monster interactions is actually really good. Even if it's something as simple as a monster that recognizes the hilt of a blade, or a famous weapon, or a banner, or heck, repeats the same mantra of of a famous poem the PCs are part of, or something like that. Vampanoid says, how crazy would that be if there was an ancestral barbarian in the party, and when he raged, his ancestors' spirits wouldn't appear because they're alive? Ooh, what? Wait, that would. I rage. I summon the spirits of my ancestors, and everyone's just like, what? Why aren't they here? Sorry, the necromancer brought them back to life. The evil necromancer and the family members are like, it's about time. Shoot, we were following around our barbarian family member and just been using us. No conversation. Just show up and help me out. Sure, we help you move, and what do? You don't even pay us in pizza. Michael says, since the trope of my family died is so common, using that family as undead is a great tool. I would pass a note to the player, or text that player, yep, that the undead wears familiar clothing. And we don't have to limit ourselves to your typical undead. Zombies. I mean, hell, wraiths and whites are excellent. Banshees and ghosts. What are some other great undead? Oh, the Vargoyle, a head with a spinal cord that floats around with bat wings. That's a strange one right there. Heck, you could even do another one. Ghouls and gas. Mummies could be included in that, and a mummy doesn't need to be created by a ritual. Maybe they were returned because something preserved their body, and they're still alive. Or heck, you could even have a mummy lord as the matriarch of the family, and the other mummies are other family members behind them. Or actually, I would mix and match them. a ghostly uncle, a vampiric little sister, maybe a family friend that is now a wraith or something. I would mix and match it too, and have them keep coming back. Like maybe they're not out to murder the PCs, or at least not yet, but they are there to whisper in the ear when they're trying to take a nap. They are, whenever the PC goes off on their own, they're there trying to tap them on the shoulder and scare them to death. Or maybe they're just they're walking forever, walking after the PC as a relatively vocal zombie or something. And no matter how many times the PC hacks them down, they get back up again, and they just keep coming. They keep coming. Mike says the wraith of a domineering parent, the vampire of a manipulative cousin. Yep, the zombie of a workaholic father. Yeah, you're never amount to anything. Keeps coming after him. I love that idea. So okay, so let's go with a necromancer, a dead necromancer. Maybe it's not. Maybe there's no magic off button. We see that so often in movies where the to stop the onslaught of the hordes of fill in the blank androids, undead, aliens. It's, well, let's just punch the ticket of the bad guy, and then all the rest of them will fall down and die, right? Maybe that's not the case for an evil necromancer. Maybe the undead continue to live on, and maybe they were under the literal mind control of the PC. Excuse me, of the NPC, but now that they're gone, the undead start to revert to old behaviors, unfinished behaviors. So maybe the undead horde scatters to the winds, but they scatter back to their old habits, and it hasn't gone away. Or maybe there's a permanent feature across the land that anyone that dies rises again. And I played it in a Cursed Desert campaign where we were crossing a desert and people died from dehydration and all kinds of like natural and unnatural events. And the sand would cover up the people that were wandering because now they're undead. And what they would continue a parody of what their old actions were forever in the desert, being covered and uncovered in the sand. So they could be covered for dozens of years, and all of a sudden the sand dunes would fall off their bodies and they'd start stumbling through the land. And it was just like, ooh, oops. Run right play. Hey, what's up, Keel? Says, hey friends, I'll try not to derail the conversation today. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I try to I allowed it to get squirrely, but yeah. We're talking about the leftover effluvia of our big bads in a way to explore in the places that after destroying the big bads are left. Something else from necromancers are, well, all the dead bodies, right? So again, we do have the hazards of carrion monsters. Like I've always wondered why hordes of zombies were never surrounded by and intermingled with other things that live inside of them. Like, oh, I don't know, zombies carrying around hives of insects, or buzzards and vultures circling overhead, picking at their dead bodies and whatnot. Even other predators that like to eat dead flesh and whatnot. Maybe trudging through a swamp, and there's like small fish that are eating at the flesh and whatnot. Always wonder why that isn't the thing, but we could do that. As well as the fact that if the PCs know that if they go down, say, drop to 0 hit points, there isn't any death saves. They're just going to rise up again as dead. That's going to add a lot of tension. There will be no yo-yoing if that happens in 5th edition. If the Dungeon Master says, you know what, this necromancer covered the land in this enchantment that hasn't gone away. So if you drop to 0, you're dead. You're an undead. Sorry, you know. Mike says, it may be such that any slain in this new world risk the dangers like Game of Thrones. If they're not burned, there's always a chance. Exactly. Maybe that's the reason why death rites in this world, this new world after the necromancer was killed, is necessary. That you need to perform death rites. And death rites could be anything: burying bodies, the clerical manner of speaking over the soul so that they can rise on and not remain on the earth. Anything like that could be possible, and that might be a thing overlaid in the world. Not to mention the fact that like Curse of Strahd and Van Richten's Guide, there might be something very necromantic in the world. So, for example, anything from like dark necromantic clouds filled with a necrotic lightning that might sweep through a region, or um, the needing to get resources to heal from wounds. Like natural healing might not even be possible, or magical healing might be a beacon for enemies. And so the PCs need to, much like a much like a spotlight at a at the brand new local dance place that's opened up in nightclub in your region. The minute the PCs use healing magic, technically radiant energies, it might be like a call to a call to every evil entity around, like, ooh, there they go, and they might summon enemies towards them, which might actually be a good thing if the PCs do it in the right way, or terrible in other way. But getting to what my co-hosts are talking about, Vampanoid says if their parent is a powerful, intelligent undead, upcast upcast geese, go to your room. And if I don't, well, let's take a look. Let's see. If you don't fill the quest, you'll suffer 60-10 damage every day or something like that. Oh man. Hung King, let's see if I can decipher this. I thought one time to make a campaign that had a villain that had an army of pumpkin heads from the movie Pumpkinhead. Ooh. Headless horsemen and all those kind of things. Yeah, and Halloween's always a great theme to use for anything necrotic. So yeah, I love it. And also piles of dead bodies and random arms grasping at people on the battlefield. Heck, even using cover, scaling and climbing over piles of bones and dead bodies, and which again might be cover from some enemies. It might also cause a landslide of bodies to cover you. You might get grappling features from being around undead hands. I always like the idea of the proverbial dungeon with the undead reaching out of literal dungeon bars or prison bars and needing to remain in the center of the room to do battle instead of getting pushed against the walls and being grappled there. Again, being easy to hit and having undead hands scrape away at your dead of your living flesh. Mike says, consider the spawn of Caius. The worms that create these zombies are the real danger. It becomes a world where the fear of any crawling worm, caterpillar, or maggot becomes systemic. Absolutely. Who's to say that, like, hey, let's go take a long rest? It's like, well, there's a lot of like maggots and insects and things crawling over your stuff. And you're like, if it climbs on the back of my head or into my ear or something or across my temple, that means I'm going to become the thing. Yeah. Or what's the other one? Yellow spawn. The plant that's got the yellow musk creeper. That's it. The yellow musk creeper. A biological zombies and stuff. Mike says a society may just pound a large stake through anything killed, even if they rise, they're stuck to the ground. Yeah, how many times have we seen that in a Walking Dead? They're like, you got bit, or hey, I'm elderly, I can't function anymore, and everyone knows if I die, I'm going to rise again as undead. So we're going to have a ritual suicide as part of our society or something. Yeah, absolutely. And the dangers of that, player characters knowing that maybe there is no maybe their hit point maximum is taken down, like what is it, mummy rot, that if every time you suffer damage your hit point maximum is reduced by the same amount, and in order to recover from it you might need to go to specific regions that are blessed or acquire very rare herbs. I was about to say herbs and spices, but yeah, herbs and spices that are used in the healing method, and or maybe magical healing itself is temporary. Maybe all radiant effects are temporary. Like, yeah, you'll gain your hit points back with a laying on hands, healing word or something, but it'll fade after a given amount of time. Like it only lasts about an hour till you have to use it again. And it's like, ooh, well, it'll help us now, but it might not help us in the future if we are exploring some or doing something. Mike Gould says there may be associated celestial events. An eclipse or a new moon after battle means something will rise. And we've already seen this used in pop culture. Game of Thrones. There was the event of the red comet, and then that changed the way it changed the nature of how the world worked when in relationship to magic. So the destruction of a big bad during a celestial event might mean that a thing happens in the explorative elements of the world, right? And why not? Undead might be able to smell people like a shark smells blood. Any number of things. So yeah, absolutely. Mike says cannot remember the enclosure used in parts of Africa that was intended to keep lions at bay. It's made of thorny bushes. Anyway, I like the idea of wild rose bushes holding undead at bay. Ooh. Now, plant life holding an undead back isn't new. What is it? Garlic has been used against vampires. Wolf's bane used against lycanthropes. So that's not really an uncommon thing at all. Vamploy says you need to gather a special blend of 11 different secret herbs and spices. the rogue is like, aren't you going to heal my wounds? And the PCs are like, I don't know, smells like finger licking good. You do smell finger licking good. All right. King Hung Badass says, what about an urban fantasy campaign where the Lich had the army of undead biker gangs? Well, we haven't really gotten into a modern setting, but mounted undead, of course, that's a real thing. Of course there is. Heck, any knight on a horseback, camelback, elephant back, or something, rhino back that's now dead with an undead rhinoceros as its mount, maybe like what used to be a benevolent African king is now has like a burning spear and his body's half decomposed, riding on a decomposing elephant where you could see its hardened flesh and its bones underneath. Hell's yes. Uh, Now, all right, what are some other big bads that we cast off and have changed the environment? How about we're going to move on to the elder gods? Yeah, we're going to go Cthulhuid. If we love ourselves some mind flayers, some illithids, we love tentacles. It's something about anything with a tentacle. Hell, there's a whole OnlyFans site dedicated to tentacles and whatnot. Yeah. There so many things related to that. And so, but what about those elder brains and Cthulhu and what is it? Gibbering mouthers left over from the insanity? Maybe that stuff is left over as well in this world. We could even combine this with the undead, meaning like instead of zombies and skeletons walking around, maybe there are people who are literally mindless, whose minds have been wiped, or people who have been artificially made insane. So it's not it's not a modern day classical diagnosed a mental affliction, but something done from the outer worlds. And maybe these people are you use the same stats for like mindless undead or ravaging undead like ghouls or something, but they're really just people whose minds have been broken. To the point where you could literally hack their arm off, but they don't feel the pain because they're crazy. They've been driven insane, not that they are born insane or something. Also, what happens? Like maybe the literal landscape has been affected. Like there are, I don't know, single eyeballs floating around the region who are like the agents of the leftover dead Cthulhuid creatures. Maybe there are pools of, instead of blood and acid and ooze, which all those things. Maybe there are pools of people that have been decomposed and they become gibbering mouthers as their bodies have turned to sludge, and all you see are eyeballs and mouths and the screams of pain and suffering in these strangely slow moving pools of body fluids and whatnot. Um, uh, Very strange, very crazy involved in it. Run Right Play says there's an interesting thought experiment. Imagine if the mass necrotic effect didn't need a body, only a soul. Burning bodies would do nothing to stop the army of possessed inanimate objects. Ooh, people's souls floating around the sky is going back to Scream Man. The dead souls of the of people that have been restless is tight. Yep. Well, how do you defeat them? It's barely an inconvenience. Super easy. No, but no, in all seriousness though, yeah, a necrotic effect might need to be the PCs might need to navigate in a world where they need to alleviate the necrotic effect, not fight the side effect of the undead coming back from, say, inhabiting. Maybe that's where that animated armor comes from. But if you have a world filled with war machines or something, maybe those things come alive from the spirits of the undead, the restless undead. Not to mention the fact that, again, anything from the re-skinning the restless undead as, say, psychic spells that are in particular regions to maybe the spirits don't move at all. Like maybe the PCs come around the corner and there's a valley filled with the screams of the undead, and they're like banshees. They're just not moving. They're just screaming over the death of their loved ones. And if the PCs fall into that region or get pushed into it, they're going to suffer, the effects of the screaming banshees. But if they go around it, or maybe they have to cover their ears and take on the deafened condition to avoid the screams of the undead, right? And how do you do that? Like, I put my hands up to my ears. Okay, so what are you holding in your hands then? You're like, well, I've got my arcane symbol and I've got my weapon, and like, well, how many hands do you have? Uh, Mike Gould says, regarding celestial events and moving forward, I ended one campaign by having a throne based on a series of circular steps. Each series of steps had symbols. You could rotate each step to line up the symbols. Ooh, that sounds like a good thing. How the symbols lined up determined what changes would be made to the world in the next campaign. Ooh, that's giving a lot of power to the players, and I love it. I think that's tight. All right, I'll stop stealing that from Screen Rant. But yeah, the pitch meetings. But yeah, the idea that something, the actions of the players have affected the world. Hell's yeah, hell yeah. I mean, we've seen that in the movies with the Infinity Stones, right? The players might either possess or destroy like certain magic items, or a specific villain was killed that held something aloft. They themselves had a connection to a MacGuffin, whether it's a far off set of stars or a link to the plane of fire or something of that nature. And now that they're dead, that magic is thrown out there in the world. Mm-mm-mm. Did I miss a comment? Mike says this was the throne of fate, controlled previously by Bitter Whistle, the Frost Hag, big bad evil guy of the campaign. With her dead, choosing how things would play out was totally player choice. And there's no reason why the player characters couldn't have affected the outcome of what is to come, especially if the bad guy has already told the player characters what the hell is going on. Meaning, like, if there's a bad guy who's like, hey, I don't know, a great evil greater than me is going to overtake the landscape. And if you stop me, this thing's going to ravage the world. Maybe they're telling the truth this entire time. Um, Tesla mentions in the Discord the Fiendish Codex 2, published in third edition, describes that layer 6 of the 9 hells, Malbolge, is under the direction of the daughter of Asmodeus or Asmodeus, the most powerful devil lord. Glacia, who has made the plane fleshy with tall, oily hairs instead of forests. I like that. Lakes of bile and viscera, and ivory towers that used to be fingers or ribs. Special mention also was made of a great mound at the layer center called the birthing pit. The reason it looks like this is because, as part of taking over the layer, Glacia used her powers to turn Malagarde, Malagard, the previous ruler, into the layer. Step into the wrong part of Malaboj, and you can still hear screaming. And listen, listen. We love ourselves. We love ourselves some fleshy dungeons, don't we? Like PCs literally walking, eh, tiny, walking along the flesh of some more massive than a Titan-sized thing, forests made of like pubes and whatnot, and yeah, maybe walking along like, what is this? What is this weird, slightly angled plane of ankle deep water or something? And it's like, actually, you're walking along, a godling's eyeball, and you got to watch out because the eyeball's about to blink or something. It's going to blink right over top of your heads, and they're like, no, you know. Um, you can get a little dark when it comes to certain human bodily functions and things, but beyond all that, adventuring into tunnels made out of flesh and things of that nature is awesome. So, absolutely. Uh, King Hung mentions, what about the player character stuck between a war against two evil empires? Well, now we've talked about those kind of things. We're talking about the evil's already dead, but their residue is still around. Although this could be, well, how do you say that? It could be that the player characters have already destabilized politically in a massive war by destroying the leaders of the armies. So now all they're living in is the detritus of a vast military campaign. And again, we've seen this again before, where we have artificial constructs running around, like almost like android bodies and tanks and things, but more than just the bodies and such. There's also, like, I mean, more so than piles of dead bodies and machines of war. What would be the equivalent of a fantasy landmine? Maybe there are glyphs that are hanging around, or those battlefields going back to the undead are filled with the souls of the dead or something. Vampanoid says, I love the visible souls just floating around. I want to give the players an item to use those souls as fuel to recover spell slots. Each power, such power and temptation to make them slip towards evil. And of course, all the bad guys would love to get their hands on it. Uh, I think in Descent into Avernus or Avernus, there are like soul coins, Oboli or something like that. I think something similar is used in Ravnica, the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica as well, where the souls of the living are used as a form of economy. But yeah, having souls just, and mind you, souls could be just hanging around as info dumps, like, let's go speak to them. They could act as spell slots. They could act as, maybe there's a random, what's the spell that is a spirit that if you walk into it or it touches you, you get healed. Maybe that's hanging around in the landscape, just hanging around somewhere, not moving, but just there in the battlefield for the PCs to use or to discover. Imagine like a ghost, whatever ephemeral ghost there is, and if the PCs uncover it, it then becomes a spirit guardian or something for the players to use temporarily. That maybe it's not a quote unquote item, but it is a gift to the players and whatnot. So why not? Mike says, Malbolge is the former body of a hag who ruled it previously. I forgot about that. I forgot. That's right. That's right, because it was gifted to um, Glacia by Asmodeus, and she took it over because they're always fighting each other. And maybe the old hag is like punished to be part of the to become literally part of the plane of existence. Um, Oh yeah, absolutely. Mike continues. The lesser of two evils campaign can be very gritty, but risks making the players feel like their choices do not count. It sucks either way. Exactly. Allowing the players the chance to incite revolution, or play one empire against the other has some merit. Both require a lot of investment by the players. Absolutely. And if you have a massive we can think of all of the side effects of a massive war, and this might not be something that is extra worldly. This just might be a massive war between two continents or what have you, two nation states or whatnot, and the results thereof, whether there are landmines and okay, let's use World War I, right? Landmines. There was constant shelling, mustard gas, no man's land filled with barbed wire, and maybe there are automated or mechanically automated devices or spells that were set up to do a thing if the PCs cross a certain landscape. Like instead of landmines that explode, like glyphs or something, maybe it's bolts of lightning, or they are paralyzed or turned to stone or teleported somewhere randomly, and the PCs need to navigate through the battlefield. But of course, they're being attacked by aerial creatures, and the PCs are like, well, we could run in a straight line, but who's to say what your foot is? And I'm going to use detect magic. Great, now you know where all the landmines are at, but again, you can't run in a straight line, so what happens there? And they're like, well, I'm going to dodge around, and like that's not going to get you to the other end faster, but it sure will help you, as well as the fact that could you imagine like clerics on both sides of a war that are using like the armies don't want to fight each other anymore because they're tired, but the clerics of the gods are like, well, we're going to heal you and throw you back into the fight, and the warriors are like, no, please stop healing my wounds, I need to stop fighting. And they literally get to the warriors on each side, you literally get to know each other, like backgrounds and stuff, because they keep killing each other, and they start having conversations, and they're like, oh, how's your daughter? Well, she's been pretty good. She graduated. Hack, 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 dead. Healed up, head reattached, come back again. Oh, so what were you saying about a graduation? Oh, it was pretty good. Hack, hack. Mm-mm. Mike says a haunted world where the spirits of the dead are omnipresent sounds great. The dead may be the reason magic items work, like they haunt items. Yep. Why airships work, carried by the dead, or how long range. Go there. Now, having having something you need to interact with to get a thing is quite awesome. You know, that magic sword, you might need to parlay with the spirit in that magic sword to get it to do a thing, and maybe your actions prevent the spirit from enchanting the weapon in the first place, and the spirit walks away. Who's to say? Spells work as the dead carry messages through the ethereal plane. Ooh, I like that. I like that. Lastly, there are some big bads that are defeated that can modify the environment, whether it's something such as like anything from the outer planes that interacts with the prime material plane is going to bring with it something like elemental creatures. We've had plenty of modules and adventures built around um, elemental chaos, and so the same thing could happen in this sense, kind of moving away from the undead aspect of it, where at a moment's notice there might be torrential rain or lightning and thunder, hurricane winds, earthquakes, crevices opening, mudslides, avalanches, snowstorms, frigid cold. What are some other blazing heat, dehydration, salt flats and things like that, like all those kind of things. So essentially, there really is no limit to what the environment can become that the PCs have to navigate through. And lastly, of course, um, navigating through the debris of what happened in the battle in the first place to bring down the BBEG is is exploration. And exploration doesn't need to be through ancient crypts. Exploration can be through abandoned cities that were just abandoned 3 weeks ago. It can be navigating through a small town that's been flooded, or a place like Pompeii that's on the side of a volcanic eruption, and the PCs need to scramble through different buildings and alleyways and cities and rooftops and sewers to acquire the MacGuffin before the city is overrun by flows of lava or pyroclasmic gases or something of that nature. Mike says it gives the world a voodoo shamanistic feel, especially with el- elemental things where maybe the druid and rangers in the group need to parlay with elementals to navigate their way through the world without just being straight up murder killed by the environment or something. Um, Absolutely. King Hung mentions, what about a landscape overrun with dangerous and rogue elementals after the war? Exactly. Exactly. Um, well, we know that written in most of those spell descriptions that if you summon an elemental, that you also have to control that elemental. Unseen servants. What's the no, invisible stalkers left uncontrolled will blast through a region and start murder killing people. And the opposite could be true. Air elementals that suck the air out of a region and it becomes a vacuum, or earth elementals so powerful they flip gravity in a region. Uh, and they don't necessarily need to be classic elementals either. The elemental effects might be left behind, like maybe there's a valley with bolts of lightning striking down randomly from the sky because elementals, right? Or there's a region of tall mesas and plateaus, and super strong winds blow through this region. And how do you figure out what those winds are? Well, it's permanent gusts of wind type spells that flow throughout the region. Um, there's I've also wondered why this isn't the case, but I use a house rule that a player who has a spell can disrupt the natural element by casting the spell as basically counterspelling that specific spell. So, an example would be a druid with gust of wind can negate a real gust of wind, which has the same spell effect as a natural thing, by casting their own gust of wind to counter the gust of wind, if that makes sense. Or a player character that has move earth can temporarily stop an earthquake, or like if someone has an earthquake spell they can stop an earthquake, so on and so forth. But and by using that spell slot to do the thing, but it actually does the opposite. It stops it for the duration that they normally would cast it. Mike says a salt flat may be the only location the dead cannot cross. Salt has always had a history associated with mysticism. Yeah, there was a B movie I remember where the main character, it was a young lady who was like fighting a warlock or something, and she found like the big bad evil book of the Necronomicon, and of course surrounding it was in salt was to prevent the magic, and the movie ended with her. She's got a shovel and she's digging in the ground, and you're like, is she digging into like salt or something? She takes the book, buries it, and drives away, and you realize she's in the middle of a giant salt flats like in Utah or something. And she drives away, and she's like with her middle finger up, like, yeah, driving away in her a convertible, like, I don't know, 60s Chevy or something like that. Yeah, burying the Necronomicon in the salt flats pretty much would prevent it from ever being used if salt was a thing from a warlock. But yes, absolutely, salt flats might be a thing. And think about it, like, what if there's another danger in the salt flats, and the PCs have to decide, okay, so we can escape the hordes of the undead and spirits, by going across the salt flats. But the salt flats themselves have their own danger. I don't know, underground gray worms that are just purple worms with a different color. Yeah. Mike says the wilds may be overrun by elementals. The higher the level of spell used in an area, the greater the risk of bringing an elemental into the world. That's what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Burning hands, okay, you might create a little small one. Fireball, okay, you're getting a little outrageous. Meteor swarm, yeah, you pretty much summoned random elementals, and the PC that's like, I'm going to use summon elemental spell, and all the PCs are like, don't. Oh, sure, you summoned one under your control. You also made a blaring klaxon call for like 8 others to show up randomly or whatnot. So yeah, absolutely. And navigating this world might require using so many other skills to do a thing. Like, for example, let's go back into that pillar filled, mesa plateaued region of a valley, and the PCs need to navigate past all the pillars of stone that if they knock them down, they'll get crushed. Well, maybe stealth or acrobatics or sleight of hand must be used to navigate around them. Otherwise, if they get pushed against them, they'll knock them down. Well, was it Tesla? Thank you. Burying the book in the salt flat was it the movie Warlock in 1989? Well, duh. I'm like, there was a movie in the old days, a B movie about fighting a warlock. I wonder what the name of the movie is. Tesla's like, it's called Warlock. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It was a movie about this warlock. He's like, it Warlock. Yeah, I said that. Tesla's like, it's Warlock, you stupid mother. Anyway, uh, Lord Havoc says, "What about a lich that have been buried that have buried undead bodies as landmines? That when somebody walks across them, they would grab them and try to bite them." Well, hell yes, hell's yes. Walking across a giant battlefield or a cemetery or those unfortunately classic regions where they dig a giant pit and dump people's dead bodies into it, innocent people, they may try to grab up at your ankles when you try to cross a region. And how interesting would it be on the battlefield to have undead and skeletal hands grabbing you by the ankles while you're also being attacked by other things that are spirits and other undead on the top of the land. I know I went back to the undead. And maybe after 3 rounds, a head pops out of the ground and bites you in the ankle, causing some other effect or something like that, right? But anyway, yeah, elemental effects, all the kind of stuff is really cool. So Mike says the birth of a Genasi may foretell the arrival of an elemental lord. Genasi may be the only way to negotiate with these beings. And that negotiation might be very temporary. Like, just because someone makes a great charisma check or uses a friend spell or some other kind of speak with or control or something doesn't mean it has to last forever. And elementals are probably it probably makes the most sense that most elementals are very ephemeral. They're very chaotic with the way that they handle themselves. So it makes perfect sense that it makes perfect sense that making a deal with the local water elemental to not put a whirlpool around your sailing vessel and drown you works for about a good 10 minutes before it changes his mind. Yeah. Like Michael says, undead landmines, okay, stolen. Exactly. And why the hell not? Like literally we can combine exploration, hey, we need to find out why this location is dangerous, to battlefield environment. Okay, PCs cross region, they understand that if they stand still, undead hands are going to reach up at them while they're being attacked from the air, or a horde of other things are coming after them on the surface, to knowing that if they get grappled, that if they don't escape the grapple that's grabbing their ankles, they might be bitten, to the fact that even if they're not bitten, whatever's underground is going to add to the horde that's going after them anyway. The proverbial undead coming out of the ground, adding to their numbers. So all of those things might pile on top of each other, right? Like one leads to the next, leads to the next, leads to the next. And I think that to me, that organic method of escalation, of tension, of the environment changing based on the player's actions of doing a thing. Like, for example, maybe one of the bad people that they're fighting, like one of the orc hordes they're fighting, they slash the orc horde across the chest and kick them backwards into the ground to have that orc grabbed by the undead arms. Why wouldn't that be a tactic, right? You know, that push shove maneuver that people say is so useless probably works pretty good in this context. You know, the mindless beasts that are going after the player characters, and the player characters throw their food that they've been hunting and throw it behind them so that the hungry beasts eat it instead of them, is a good tactic. You know, so doing something very organically in the game, I think really fits in. And us as the game masters and dungeon masters, it just allow ourselves to be open-minded to using people being creative in problem solving. Mike says, combine the two. Undead implanted with an elemental object like a gem, fluid, gas, etc., may result in turning a simple zombie into an elemental explosive device. Of course. Well, maybe what the spontaneous combustion of people, flaming skeletons going after the PCs, or maybe dwarves that die don't turn into zombies and skeletons. Maybe they turn into very small, tough elementals or something, or um, a funeral pyre where people are supposed to be left to the dead. If people do not speak the truth, speak of acts of contrition over the dead, they will rise again as flaming warriors to come hunt down the PCs as flaming undead wraiths or something like that. I love it. I love it a lot. Being attacked by the undead, and when they touch you, you freeze to death or something. Mike says, I have a homebrew undead called a Forsaken that has an elemental effect like fire, cold, or poison. It appears in the out of the box encounters. Ooh, yeah. I like the idea of Forsaken. I don't remember reading that, but I'm gonna have to read it. There's so many encounters in there, but I'm gonna have to read through that because it makes perfect sense to layer other damage effects onto undead because of maybe from the nature in which they died, or the region in which they come from, or it could be a side effect of the kind of person they were in life. A very cold-hearted person becomes cold. A very fiery, passionate, brutal person takes on fire. A person who's been very stoic and unchanging takes on some kind of earthly thing. A person who spouted lies and deceptions out of their mouth has poison. You could go on and on and on. So, yeah. All right, King Hung. Yeah, what about a lich using undead dinosaur skeletons in his army? Well, that's just as good as the undead dinosaur that vomits up undead things it's eaten. Yeah, that's a possibility too. But anyway, guys, we have come to the end here. Going on a little bit too long, but that's all right. Tomorrow, of course, is Future Friday. You'll see what happens in Future Friday about the destruction of the evil and what happens later on. There's plenty of sci-fi that's done that. Someone take a look at the end of, say, Independence Day and the starships that crashed on the planet. What happened to all those starships and the technology inside of them? Well, we'll talk about that tomorrow. But anyway, guys, thank you so much. Please like, share, subscribe, follow, comment. I don't know, give me the finger, whatever the case may be. But just help out the unfeeling algorithms in my way, and I will greatly appreciate it. So, guys, have a great one. I will see thee later. Oh, Mike says, riffing on the elemental effects, I also have a homebrew monster. called a grenade snail. If you bite the head off, it explodes the next turn. They're about the size of oranges and can be thrown. That's pretty nasty. Thank you, Kyle. Run Right Play says, take care, DBJ. By the way, for those who don't know, if you use the interwebs and type in Run Right Play, you'll find yourself deposited somewhere great and creative on the interwebs. Please go there. uh, like, share, and subscribe over there as well. You won't be disappointed. Guys, have a great one. I'll see you later.